So let's take a look at how we have to do the unwrapping on a more complicated object, like this bike frame. And let's say along the crease line, I would like a different material be than, for example, along the rest of the bike. So I could go into edit mode. And as you can see, I have already certain edges selected. So that, for example, separates the side faces from kind of like those top faces, and then those end caps, they are being separately unwrapped as well. I can select everything, go to the UV editor, click new, and for example, create a sufficiently large texture. So 1000 by 1000 is okay. Click OK. And then with my mouse in the 3D view, press U, unwrap. And here is, for example, now my object, where I have all the different faces unwrapped. So here, for example, are the caps. And sometimes Blender rotates them differently, so you might have to adjust a few things. This one, or those two, came out a little bit crooked, so I would have to clean this up a little bit. So similar to maybe modeling by hand, I can also change the orientation and the scale. So for example, if I want the upper one to be more similar to the lower one, I could try to do this a little bit and spend some more time on it. This one, actually, I just move up. And this is basically your canvas in which you can move your UVs or UV islands basically freely around. Now this UV layout we can actually write into a file and then use that in Photoshop. So I go to UVs and then select Export UV Layout, go to the desktop and UV Layout. Click Export, it saves it as a PNG file. Let's go to Pixelmator or Photoshop, whatever you're using. And let's take a look where that image is. So it's here. So as you can see, it takes actually the wire mesh, and wherever you have the wire mesh, it draws lines, and then the background is transparent. For example, now we could maybe pick a color, let's say like this, and for example, paint around this line. So let's do this a little bit. And I'm sorry for my crooked lines, but I'm using a mouse. So it's a little bit more complicated. Of course, having a graphic tablet significantly helps to do this. And then let's say the other part of my bike I would like to be, let's say, white. So could pick a white color. I have a layer created below. And now this image I can export as a JPEG. And let's say I call this one UV layout painted. Export. Then I go to here. Go to material, add a new material. I would like an image, and it should be this UV layout painted. And for the vector, I would like to use UV. Let's go to material. There you can see now that wherever I had this painted, because it lines up with my wire mesh, I have that texture there. So it's a very easy way to do this. Now let's say you would like to have a logo actually on it. That might make the situation a little bit more complicated. So I have, for example, here already a Porsche logo. Let's copy this and then paste it in, and I have to precisely position that thing right now. So I'm turning my wire mesh on again, and I think this upper part of my mesh is the front face that is facing the camera. I can rotate it a little bit, maybe like this. Okay, so that is somewhat okay. But what I need now is an alpha map that can decide where I will see the texture of my logo and where, for example, I see a different texture. So I add another layer and I'm going to paint this one black. So basically this is now my black and white alpha image. Everything that's white will be one material. Everything that will be black or is black will be a different material, specifically the one with my Porsche logo. So this black and white image, for example, I am going to export JPEG, let's say UV alpha, and then the image of my Porsche logo I export, let's say UV logo. And actually, you know what? I'm going to save this as well as an image. UV wire mesh. And export. So for example here, I'm going to select this wire mesh. And you actually see that that's a very easy way if you want to have kind of like a graphical representation of your model. So the lines you modeled will be baked into your texture and can then be mapped over your object again. And now I need to somehow mix this with my logo texture together. So I press N and maybe I call this one wire texture. I can duplicate this and open my logo. I call this one logo. And you see I can reuse this texture input multiple times because all the different textures I'm using will use the same UV layout. And this one, for example, I call alpha. Click open, and then here's my black and white image. Okay, so the next step will be somewhat familiar, but I have two images which I would like to mix together. So I don't have two different materials, just two different images. So instead of using a mix shader, I can go to color and select mix. And then, for example, put in the wire, put in the logo, and then the alpha image I put into the factor. So the black and white will be used as a stencil map to decide what texture will be visible. And then the output of this mixture goes into the diffuse color input. And let's render it. And as you see, everything works correctly, but not the way I would like to, because I see my wire texture where the logo is, and they see the white background of my logo where my bike is. So what I have to do is I have to flip the inputs order. And then there now you see I have my logo input right here, and then the rest is my wire texture. So that's basically the same like mixing two different shaders, but here we just mix two different textures together, and instead of using for example the Fresnel or the geometry to decide when you see what material, we just use a black and white image to decide where you see a certain texture. And that's basically the easiest way how you could map then different materials together, or to position a logo on a product. So you just generate this UV layout, and then in Photoshop, Illustrator, you put your graphic on it, and then you follow the process I showed here to create a material where then, for example, that logo is rendered on it. And let's say, well, you still would like to go with different materials. That is still not really a problem, because, wrong key. Let's say I would like to be able to change the color of my bike constantly while having the same logo on top. So in that case, maybe I might have to use then a mix shader. So like this. So this logo goes in here. And then this alpha goes into the mix shader factor. And then, for example, here I can change now the color of this material. And the advantage of this approach is, well, if I would like this now to be maybe a glossy material, I can swap it out, and then it is, for example, a glossy material where I have the diffuse logo on top. So you see, it's actually a rather very easy to use system, and it's very, very flexible with what you can do. Because I have this nice Chrome object, you also see those beautiful highlights I have on top, and then the rest is rather black. So again, if I maybe increase the light, you will see that the reflections there are not pitch black anymore. That looks maybe a little bit better than something so dark like this one. And the area lights create really nice highlights on the top parts of that bike. So it puts a good contrast on it. And then for this material, well, I mean, you are really free in exploring it. I mean, if you just only want to change maybe the basic color, at that point, maybe we might not necessarily need to use this. We can use, again, the color mixer and have the logo in here, mix this together. So for example, now it's just the color I can adjust, but I can't really change the material type of, for example, the frame. So if it has to be diffused and you just want to change the basic color, well, that's of course a perfectly valid approach to do. So diffuse mixing with glossy or just the color mixer, mixing colors and textures. It all doesn't really matter. It's just all the same process.